Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back with another video. In today's video we're going to be ranking the Gex games. Oh yeah, we're ranking Gex, and it is your host, the gexpert, me, Joe Nathan. Now when it comes to Gex, over the last couple years it seems Gex has become a joke or a running meme, but I assure you, Gex is neither of those to me. I've always liked Gex. I have videos going back even a decade of me talking about Gex. Always been a big fan of Gex. I've played all the Gex games, so I really am the gexpert, and we're going to be looking at all these gexclusives here. We're going to be ranking these games based on quality, obviously, and how good some of the levels are, because one thing that Gex is really known for, other than him, and him being, well, not the funniest, is how good his levels are, because the levels in Gex are pretty good for the most part. So set your Gexpectations, because this is going to be a fun ranking list, that's for sure. And some of these games might even be gexperimental, if you would say. But with all that in mind, let's get started and let's see what the worst Gex game is. Now, I hate to be the Gexecutioner on this one, but the worst Gex game is definitely Gex 3 on the Game Boy Color. Gex 3 on Game Boy is not a good game. It is a very bad gexample of Gex, and it's not anywhere near as good as the real Gex 3, and is very poor in a variety of aspects, whether it's the controls, whether it's the fact that the game doesn't really even attempt to be funny or humorous in any kind of way. That definitely makes it worse. Or it is the piss poor levels that really do a poor job of doing anything, actually. And to be honest, I think even the most diehard of Gex heads probably don't even know that this game exists, and I wouldn't blame them, as the game is not good. I didn't even know it existed till I was going to make this video. Then I was like, shoot, now I gotta play it. So shout out to my man Age for letting me get that footage that you see here. But even as a diehard Gexpert, can't recommend this game. Not worth playing. There's really just nothing to this game, honestly. It's a poor 2D platformer that is a cheap imitation of the Gex we know and love. And in the number 4 spot, we have Gex Enter the Gecko for Game Boy Color. And you know what? Pretty much everything I said about the last Gex game can be said here. I mean, honestly, the last game and this game could have traded spots, and it wouldn't even have meant anything, as both of them are just really bad Gex samples of the series as a whole, with very poor levels, awkward controls, and it's just not very fun, and the game doesn't even try to make any jokes or be funny or do anything, and it's, again, a really bad Gex sample of Gex as a whole. The actual Gex Enter the Gecko just takes a fat dump all over this. I don't really like 2D Game Boy Color platformers. I think they're just way overly basic. They're more basic than an NES game, and this again shows that. This is a great example of why 2D platformers on Game Boy Color really aren't that great, and how far we've come when it comes to handheld gaming, because game's not very good. I don't really have anything else to say about it. Don't recommend it to any of my Gex heads out there. Okay, in the number 3 spot, we have a real Gex game. We have the original Gex that was on the 3DO, Sega Saturn, and PlayStation. Now, the original Gex is also a 2D platformer. However, this one is good, and is actually still pretty fun even nowadays. The game sees Gex, our favorite gecko, who is just addicted to TV shows, I guess, and has a serious problem getting up to do anything other than watch TV shows. Anyway, he's chilling watching TV when all of a sudden he gets abducted. Yes, straight abducted. Pulled into the TV by this monster creature thing known as Rez. Now, Rez abducts Gex to make him the mascot of his new channel. Now, Gex isn't having any of this. He just wants to watch TV. He doesn't want to be in the TV. So it's up to Gex to defeat Rez and collect enough remotes to get the hell out of wherever he is. Now, while the game might be a 2D platformer, this is not a straightforward point A to B platformer. It's actually a little bit of an exploration game, as the point of the game is to find these remotes, and these remotes are hidden in the level. So you can go all the way through a level and totally miss the remotes, and then you're going to have to go back and look for them. Now, Gex himself has a number of abilities, whether it's a tail bounce or the ability to crawl on basically any surface, and it adds a little bit of variety to a normal 2D platformer and really spices it up by just the ability to climb on everything. And there's even some background areas that you can climb on to really add to the variety. There's even a few power-ups in there to throw some spice in. And then, of course, it's tail time, because you get to attack enemies with your tail with like a nice little tail whip. And the game definitely tries to have some jokes. You see, Gex is voiced by Dana Gould in this game, and he throws out lots of jokes. A lot of the themes and just general atmosphere of the game is supposed to be reminiscent of 90s humor, which as a 90s kid I can resonate with. I will say that it was probably dated when it came out, but it's still funny to this day for totally different reasons now. And the only reason that this is number 3 on the list is honestly a lot of the levels, while interesting and while you can go around exploring, don't really do all that much. Once you play the game for a few hours, you've pretty much seen it all, and a number of the level themes are just way too similar. There's just way too many of the same environment in my opinion, and of course it is decent, and the game is a decent 2D platformer, but I don't think it gets to that high level of greatness that some of the other Gex games have. But I know my fellow Gex heads are big fans of this game. At number 2 we have Gex Enter the GECKO, one of the fan favorites among all Gex heads and a great example of how great this series could be. Now, Gex Enter the GECKO takes place after the original Gex and sees Rez coming back, and the military or government or FBI, whoever the hell these people are, saying it's up to Gex to go defeat him again, and so that's the plot really. So while the plot isn't the most Gexperimental, I will say that the game does try to do a few unique things over its other 3D platformer brethren, such as Sonic and Bubsy. See, while Gex is, in terms of gameplay, a pretty standard run-of-the-mill 3D platformer from the 90s, it tries to have all the levels be based off of popular things from the 90s. And in many of these levels, Gex himself dresses up and makes awkward jokes about the level and just the environment that he's in.
Never buy marmalade from a guy in a top hat.
Like, there's a level that's based off Looney Tunes, there's a level based off The Matrix, or there's a level based off Star Wars. Like, there's a bunch of levels with different themes, and I quite like how many different themes there are, and it adds to a bit of variety here for the Gex.
A luau at Mel Blanc's house. Captain, they are a bizarre alien race that find Adam Sandler funny.
And while not every level is a winner, like the prehistoric level is pretty annoying, I think that a majority of the levels are pretty good, and it's fun to go around collecting everything with. Gex has a few more moves. You can do this like karate kick now, and of course it's tail time. You can always spin the tail. It's always tail time.
It's tail time. Oh yeah, it's tail time. It's tail time. It's tail time.
The game even has a few fun boss fights, like where you fight Rex in this Godzilla-styled boss fight. And you know what, I think for the time, again, that this was better than any Godzilla game we had, I can say that. Forget Godzilla, we got Gexzilla, which is what the level is even called. And while most of the game is pretty good, I gotta say there are a few things that aren't amazing. The camera is very 90s, and well, it's just not very good, to be honest, and some of the levels, like I mentioned, are not amazing, but overall I think it is a very solid 3D platformer that honestly is pretty underrated when it comes to games on the 64 and PlayStation and 3D platformers as a whole, and that's why I think most people can appreciate this, and that's why I'm such a Gex head, is because of a game like this. And at number 1 we have Gex 3 Deep Cover GECKO, which is, in my opinion, not only one of the better 3D platformers on the 64 and PlayStation, but is actually one of the most underrated 3D platformers of them all, and is the best Gex game. Now, Gex 3 Deep Cover GECKO has a little bit of a different story than the other Gex games. It still involves Rez coming back to the media dimension and all that, but instead it also introduces this hot Playboy woman, who I guess has a thing for Gex, and Gex makes lots of just creepy sexual innuendos. In fact, that's just prevalent throughout the entire game, but it's up to him to rescue her and stop Rez again. When it comes to themes and jokes and, well, innuendos, there's a lot more in this game than the previous game. They went for a more teen rating, which you can totally tell by, and honestly, it just makes the game that much funnier for, again, the wrong reasons, but I still quite laughed at this game just for its really outdated jokes of the late 90s. It's kind of creepy innuendos that Gex makes, and just the entire, just look at this. This is just ridiculous.
Speaking of secrets, you want to see my...
Gex, quit clowning around and get me out of here. And then, after he showed me his entire collection of Star Trek bloopers, he asked me to marry him.
As I was saying, extra, my love, it's tail time.
Story and Gex aside, how is the game though? As I said, it's actually a pretty great game, and I think that it is quite underrated. A majority of the levels, in fact, I'd say pretty much every level is pretty good. There's a lot to explore, and the themes are definitely a lot better than what the previous game had, where there's like a mafia level, there's like a war level, and then there's an anime level. Oh yeah, there's an anime level in this game. Like, this was even in the late 90s, and so it's just like, damn, this game was ahead of its time. Really was Gex revolutionary. We got an anime level, and it's just Transformers. Well, there's some Gundam in there, but it's mostly just Transformers. But all the levels are quite good. There's still a bunch to collect, there's a bunch to see, there's a bunch to explore, and Gex has some new moves and tricks up his sleeve. But a majority of the game is based around these new levels, and there's a lot to do here. So while the themes are better and the levels are better, I could say the camera is confidently not better, as it's still not very good, and there were a number of graphical glitches I remember that happened when I played through Gex 3. Even to this day, there's still hella glitches with it, but I still think Gex 3 is a certified Gex classic. And if you had to play just one Gex game, I think Gex 3 would be the way to go, because it just has solid level design, it's a fun 3D platformer with a interesting story, and I'll leave it at that. And Gex himself, well, there's a reason he's so popular these days. It's because of him. He's just so charismatic, clearly, and has such funny jokes that we all love Gex. As a whole, the Gex series is probably underrated, but it seems that it's been kind of buried by memes and jokes and Gex himself, and who knows what'll happen. But the way I see it, if Bubsy can come back for not only one game, but like 2 or 3 games, I really don't know how Gex hasn't come back. Crystal Dynamics is busy dicking around with some stupid Marvel game or Avengers or whatever, and they should be making Gex 4 instead. We've all been wanting Gex 4. We all want a new Gex, either a new Gex or a remake. They could remake the original Gex. That would be cool. Anything Gex related. Did I mention I like Gex? And anyway, this has been the Gex video, the Gex ranking video. This is definitely the most professional gexpert video that there is. I hope everyone has a great day. Play some Gex. Go get some Gex. If you've ever played Gex, tell me about Gex in the comments. Did I mention Gex? And have a great Gex day. Have a great Gexmas. I don't know. Have a good Gex whatever you're doing. So, have a good one. Thanks.